people have been killed in the capital Kyiv as a shopping centre is hit by Russian shells. The mayor announces a 2-day curfew. Rescue from the rubble. Firefighters managed to pull some people out alive from the destroyed building. No surrender. Ukrainians ignore a Russian deadline to give up the besieged city of Mariupol.
The windows have been torn and broken, and all they can do now is just try to repair this damage.
And preparing to defend itself, we'll have the latest from Odessa as it is targeted by Russian shelling for the first time. And also this hour, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe speaks publicly for the first time since her release from an Iranian prison, hitting out at the length of time it took for her to be freed.
What's happened now should have happened 6 years ago. I shouldn't have been in prison for 6 years.
Well, hello, good afternoon. You're watching a special programme on the war in Ukraine, live from Lviv. We'll have all the latest from Ukraine shortly, but before that, two breaking news from the last hour. Well, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe has been speaking publicly for the first time since her release from a prison in Iran. In a news conference in Westminster, Nazanin spoke of her happiness at being reunited with her family, but she also questioned why it had taken 5 foreign secretaries and 6 years to secure her release.
I believe that the meaning of freedom is never going to be complete until such time that all of us who are unjustly detained in Iran are reunited with our families. To begin with Murad, but also the other dual nationals, members of the like religious groups or prisoners of conscience who are, we do realize that if I have been in prison for 6 years, there are so many other people, we don't know their names, who have been, suffering in prison in Iran. So I think the justice in Iran does not have any meaning, because in worst case scenario you are being given the unfair trial. If you're lucky, then you'll be picked up by a kind of semi-fair judge, but in most cases you're not being lucky. The journey back home was tough. I grant what Richard said, to thank the Foreign Secretary. I do not really agree with him on that level. I'm going to tell you that because I have seen 5 foreign secretaries changed over the course of 6 years. That is unprecedented given the politics of the UK. I love you, Richard. Respect whatever you believe. But I was told many, many times that, oh, we're going to get you home. That never happened. So there was a time that I felt like, do you know what? I'm not even going to trust you, because I've been told many, many times that I'm going to be taken home. But that never happened. How many foreign secretaries does it take for someone to come home? 5? It should have been one of them eventually. So now here we are. What's happened now should have happened 6 years ago. I think we all know I'm assuming this is going to be public knowledge of how I came home.
It's fair to assume.
I'm not going to mention, I don't know the details. But what took me home now on the very same day, 17th of March 2022, that is the very same day that I left London, 17th of March 2016, to go on a 2-week holiday, and I never returned on the flight that I was coming back home with. But I think it should have happened exactly 6 years ago. I shouldn't have been in prison for 6 years. And yeah, I think we have gone through a lot. It has been a tough journey. The coming back was also very tough. So you do realize that coming back to a daughter who is nearly 8. I left her when she was not even 2. There is a whole lot to catch up with Richard and Gabriella and getting to know them better.
Well, let's get reaction to that then. Our correspondent Ivor Bennett was there in Westminster, and you got the sense of emotion in the room, didn't you, Ivor?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of emotion on display from everyone there, and it was a fascinating press conference, nearly an hour long, and I was struck by 2 things. Firstly, how humble, dignified and sharp Nazanin was, despite everything she's been through. She's only just got home in the early hours of Thursday morning after being held in Iran for nearly 6 years. Her and her husband Richard paid tribute to all of those who helped secure her release. She also said how excited she is to be a family again, and when asked what was the specific memory that she held on to that kept her going all these years, she described a visible memory that was her daughter Gabriella, who's now 7, who was a toddler when she left, playing, and Richard, her husband, getting her a cup of fennel tea. But she also said how tough it is going to be readjusting to life at home. She left, of course, when Gabriella, their daughter, was just about to turn 2. She's now just about to turn 8, so a lot of readjusting to do. The other thing that struck me was the level of anger on display from Nazanin and everyone else at that table. She said, in reference to her release, this should have happened 6 years ago. That was a thinly veiled reference to the long-standing debt to Iran that the UK government paid of £400 million that helped secure her release. It was something that the government has repeatedly said over the last 6 years that is not attached to her release, but she's in no doubt that it was, saying this should have happened 6 years ago. How many foreign secretaries does it take? So I think there will be ramifications to come for the government on that. Tulip Siddiq calling for a review by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, but for now the focus is on this family being whole again.
Ivor, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's take you straight to our political editor, Beth Rigby, who's with one of those MPs who worked so hard to get Nazanin free. Beth.
Hi, Anna. Yes, we've just come out of that press conference and it was absolutely incredible, I have to say, to see Nazanin in the flesh, looking so well, so articulate. And I'm with the woman who has campaigned tirelessly alongside Richard Ratcliffe to get Nazanin home. It's Tulip Siddiq, Nazanin's MP. Tulip, how was that? You were tearing up in there, I saw it. How was that for you?
It was very emotional, but it was even more emotional when I met Nazanin for the first time yesterday. So I met her in West Hampstead, and it was quite strange because I know so much about her life, and she knows so much about my life, and I know details about her medical health that most people wouldn't know, and yet I'd never met this lady. And when we saw each other, she just embraced me so hard, and it was just, I sort of felt like, are we doing this so that we can feel that we're actually here in real life? And so she held me for quite a long time, and she did thank me quite a lot. And I said to her, it was all your husband. And she laughed and she said, I've been hearing this a lot. And you saw how sweet they were with each other in the press conference as well. Then all she could talk about is being with Gabriella, asking me about the community around there, the school that Gabriella goes to, because I know the school well. She was asking me about that. It was all questions about our family. It was nothing about government. Are you an MP? What do you do? Like, I don't think she's met many MPs before, but it was not about that. It was just about local issues and life.
And Tulip, you haven't met her, but you must feel like you know her. What was your impression of her when you met her? Was she how you imagined her to be? What surprised you about her? Or was she exactly how you thought she might be?
She was a lot more composed and articulate and calm than I would have been if I had been locked away for 6 years, if that makes sense. I expected her to be a lot more jittery and worried, but actually she was just so calm and quite motherly, I'd say, and just generally very dignified, quite softly spoken like Richard, but also was making quite a few jokes, which I was laughing at, because we talked about the hunger strike, and I said, you know, Richard lost 12 kilos. And she said, yes, I think he's gained 11 of those back again. Which I just thought was so funny. But you can see the chemistry between them, and you can see how Gabriella's so happy to be back with her parents. But no, there was definitely an element of how are you standing up and looking so articulate after what you've gone through and the trauma you've got through. But it also brings home, just meeting her, Beth, and you've met her today, the unfairness of the whole situation, that this innocent woman, a mother, a wife, a daughter, she was locked away. She's lost 6 years of her life because she was a pawn caught between two countries. I mean, I feel outraged.
And it was interesting, and this I have to throw back on it, but it was interesting because Richard sort of thanked the Foreign Secretary for getting her out. And Nazanin says, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. And you in that press conference talked about how many foreign secretaries, prime ministers, people that denied the link between her imprisonment and the debt. And I asked her about that too, and she said there was a black hole in her heart, but she left it on the plane. There has to be some anger there, doesn't there? But a bit of anger, but also you want action, don't you?
That's right. So it's a moment of reflection, I think, for the whole family. And I understand why, with some of the questions, she said, I'd rather not answer that and I'll come back to you. She did talk about the black hole, but I think genuinely she wants time to reflect, process, and then I think the anger will probably come, to be honest, because as you say, she was a bit more reticent about thanking the Foreign Secretary because she's dealt with so many, and she knew that the works had been in progress for a while, and there'd been so many false dawns. What I want to say, Beth, though, is for me, the chapter is closed in terms of my constituent is home, that's fine, but I owe it to Nazanin to look into why it took so long. She said to me, the minute the debt was paid, she was home. They were just pushing her out of the door. And you heard in the conference, she talks about how she was told from the second week of her imprisonment that she would be home if we paid the debt. So my question is, why didn't we pay the debt earlier? What were the restrictions in place? Was there a lack of will, or are there some other questions we should be exploring? And that's why I've said I've looked into a review, and I've asked the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee to look into an inquiry of how Nazanin's case was handled. Like, for a start, in 2013, there were 3 Iranian officials who came to this country to negotiate the payment of the debt. What happens there? And then what happened to the deal last year? Which by the way, I did raise that in Prime Minister's questions, and the Prime Minister gave me a sort of half answer, but I still want to know, because they might be thinking, well, she came home now, this deal was only last year. A whole year is a very long time in a person's life to be...
You've got a young child.
Exactly, and the time passes. And today I've been observing Nazanin and Gabriella. You know, I'm quite interested in having had a child. I have a child of a similar age, and you can definitely see that when she mentions a friend, Nazanin will say, "Oh, who's that friend again? Oh, yeah, I saw a picture, but I haven't met her." I mean, how would you feel if you didn't know your child's best friend? I mean, I know every detail of my child's best friend. So I think we need an inquiry, we need a review, we need to look into this, but we also need to look into the wider issue of this taking hostages, taking hostages in Iran and then asking us for money or whatever reason. There's got to be some answers, and I don't feel the case is closed until we have that review, so I'll certainly be pushing for it.
All right, Tulip, thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. A moment of celebration over the weekend. Some moments there in that press conference, though, of questions that need answering. Richard Ratcliffe told me last Thursday that there were lessons to be learnt. Nazanin there certainly has questions for the government, and the MP Tulip Sadiq now calling for an inquiry by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. But above all of that, wasn't it wonderful to see Nazanin? I can tell you Gabriella was at the front playing on a phone for most of the time, like any normal 7-year-old.
Yeah, lovely to have some good news. Beth Rigby, thank you very much indeed, with that breaking news, of course, that we heard from Nazanin for the first time. Well, let's return then to our coverage of the war in Ukraine. I'm in Lviv, here in western Ukraine. We're at a library in the city, repurposed for the war effort, with volunteers, as you can see, fabricating camouflage for Ukrainian soldiers. It is day 26 now. Well, attempts by the invading forces to break a perceived stalemate are hitting civilians hard. Overnight, Ukrainians in the crucial southern port of Mariupol refused to bow to Russian demands that they surrender the city. Further west, another strategic port, Odessa, was directly targeted by Putin for the first time. And last night in the capital, at least 8 people were killed after shells landed on a shopping centre. So our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, has this report now from the stricken district of Kyiv.
Amidst all the rubble of the latest Russian strike on the capital, fire crews pull out a survivor. His hands grip his rescuers as he's carefully lifted to safety. This is what life is like for those living in the city right now. An attack can come out of nowhere, anytime, any place. This explosion was substantial and captured on the car park's CCTV. It was one of several bombs to hit the capital city overnight. But shortly afterwards, photographs began circulating on the internet which appeared to show the shopping mall with military vehicles parked underneath. It's not clear how recent these photographs are or their origin. But British intelligence reports suggest the Russian military is intensifying its attacks on Kyiv. The capital is still thought to be Russia's key military objective. and defence officials are warning the troops will prioritise attempts to encircle the city over the next few days and weeks. There's still fierce fighting to the north of here, but while Russian troops have stalled in their advance on the capital, they're using long-range rocket strikes instead to terrorise and kill. What are they trying to achieve by mercilessly bombing shopping malls, hospitals, maternity areas, houses, civilians? This military chaplain says. What do they want to achieve? I can't understand it, he says. Do you understand it, he asks us. I don't think you can. The attacks are causing terrible destruction and spreading fear. I don't feel safe anywhere in Ukraine, she tells us. The city authorities have turned the capital into a fortress, and the Russian troops have been mostly held at around 20 kilometers away around the perimeter. In the center, they are resolutely trying to continue something resembling normality here. Although the sudden spike in attacks has led to a second 35-hour curfew being imposed within a week, starting tonight. And the Russian military showing they can instill terror and kill with these indiscriminate attacks without setting foot inside the capital. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Kyiv.
Well, let's take a look then at some of the other key developments of the day. The US President Joe Biden will travel to Brussels to meet NATO allies and G7 leaders to discuss the coordinated response to Russia. An ammonia leak at a chemical plant in the eastern Ukrainian city of Sumy has now been contained, but the cause is still unknown. And as of yesterday, 3.4 million refugees have now fled the country, according to the UN Refugee Agency. Well, outside Kyiv, attention is falling again on Mariupol today. Overnight, authorities there ignored a Russian deadline to surrender that crucial port city. Tens of thousands of civilians also remain. They rejected the offer of humanitarian corridors over fears of being shelled on the way out or being forcibly deported to Russia. But let's speak now to our correspondent, Sally Lockwood, who's also here in Lviv. And I guess there was no way that they would listen to that surrender terms put forward by the Russians, Sally.
Yeah, that's right, Anna. That offer of a ceasefire from Russia had a deadline for a response from Ukraine in the early hours of this morning, and the offer was flatly refused and rejected long before that deadline from Ukraine. Of course, that offer for Ukrainian forces in Mariupol to lay down their arms and raise white flags to allow the safe passage of more than 300, well, tens of thousands of people that remain trapped in Mariupol. There's more than 300,000 estimated to be there. It's not estimated to still be there. It's not clear how many would have got out during this ceasefire today. But of course, it hasn't happened. It was rejected by the Ukrainian government and also by the mayor of the city of Mariupol. Why? Well, because there's simply no trust in Russian forces and what they would do during this supposed ceasefire to allow safe passage for civilians to leave. And that's, of course, because there's been nightly bombing of this city for more than 3 weeks now. Shelters have been bombed, which have been housing civilians, the elderly, children. It's not clear if those shelters have become targets, but certainly that is something that people there fear. And it's not just the nightly bombings, Anna. The city has also been blockaded. Medical supplies, food supplies can't get in. People there now, even if they survive these bombings, fear that they could be being starved out by the Russians. And of course, there's also a massive shortage of information going into Mariupol and also coming out. Now, we've learned today that the last 2 journalists still working and reporting out of Mariupol have been extracted by Ukrainian forces, having learned that they were on a Russian hit list. So it's going to be even tougher for us to learn about exactly what is going on inside that city, which is, of course, such a focus by Russian forces. Why? Well, because if they were to take Mariupol, it would allow Russian forces in the east of Ukraine and also in the south to essentially join up and work in a more coordinated way together and give them more firepower. But I should say that we are learning some detail online and through relatives who are trying to get information about their loved ones who are stranded in Mariupol. One online group now has 86,000 members of loved ones trying to find out information about where their loved ones are inside Mariupol. And of course, the biggest concern about this lack of information isn't just the panic and chaos that it's causing, but it's also that Russia can potentially now, with no journalistic presence in Mariupol, no power, no internet, no phone signal, can essentially carry out atrocities with impunity.
Sally, updating us there. Thank you very much indeed. So let's take a look then on a map at those developments. You can see why Mariupol is so important. It sits between Russian military bases in Crimea and the separatist-held region in the east. Linking up would allow Russian forces to unite, so the city has been surrounded, as you heard from Sally there, since the early days of the invasion. Well, with civilian locations consistently targeted, an art school, the latest, thought to be sheltering some 400 people. That happened over the weekend. Tens of thousands remain, though, trapped in desperate conditions. Some residents did manage to escape last week west along a humanitarian corridor, but aid convoys into the city have been blocked by Russia. And as we heard, the number of people killed during an attack on a shopping centre in the Podil district of the capital Kyiv has risen to 8 now, according to latest reports. Well, another strategic port city firmly in Putin's sights is that of Odessa. Laying further west along the coast from Crimea, Odessa residents are preparing for a Russian advance. Well, Sky's Nick Martin has the latest from there, where explosions were heard in the early hours of this morning.
We're at an apartment complex just to the south of Odessa, right on the coast here. And in the early hours of this morning, the residents heard a series of loud bangs seemed to have been coming from the sea. And we know that there has been a Russian naval build-up in the Black Sea over the past week. But shells started to land here. Just look at this impact on the road here where one of the shells exploded, and when shells hit and make an impact, they're designed to break up into thousands of pieces of shrapnel, and the effect is pretty obvious to see here on this building. The glass shattered, and if you look closely on the masonry, it's peppered with holes, and that is where the shrapnel flung towards this building, and that is what does the damage with shells. And this morning the residents here have been trying to pick through this mess. Glass just cascaded down from the building onto the floor here, and they've been trying their best to sweep it up. And they all look pretty shocked, I have to say, when you walk around talking to them. And it's pretty sobering, is it, when you see the holes in the ground and the impact that these shells made. And they've been trying to pull the panes of glass down. You know, people live in here. This is their homes. And you can imagine in the early hours of this morning, a huge explosion, a series of explosions, we understand, just rocking this place. And just a bit further around the corner, I've counted possibly 3 more impacts where you've seen similar damage, where the shells have just exploded and everything in their wake has been shattered. Now, thankfully, at this stage, we don't think anyone has been injured or killed. But, you know, it takes time for this kind of thing to come through, and they're going to go through the apartments and just check that everyone's okay. I was speaking to a couple just down from here. I can't really show you because there's a big building blocking the sea, but they had a holiday home and a little awning, and that was just completely destroyed by another shell impact. And the military are here taking pictures. An ambulance turned up, I presume, just in case anyone was injured. But this damage, this whole of this front of this building, if you look up at it, you can see the impact. You can see the glass. The windows have been torn and broken, and all they can do now is just try to repair this damage. But, you know, for some people where the front has been completely smashed, it's hard to see them being able to stay here. Now, Odessa in the south here, key port city, has been pretty much on standby for the last 2 weeks that we've been here anyway, and we've been seeing the naval warships on the horizon, and it's possible now that they are starting to send shells in, and this is the result.
Well, as the war wears on, tactics from Russian-backed separatists are becoming increasingly macabre. This weekend, they boasted their use of devastating so-called vacuum bombs. The city of Kharkiv, just a short drive from the border with Russia, bears the scars of that vicious fighting, but also signs of a stalemate. Our correspondent John Sparks travelled with the Ukrainian military to the front line on the outskirts of Kharkiv. And a warning, his report does contain images of dead Russian soldiers.
The most desirable homes in the city of Kharkiv are located within its northern suburbs. But no one comes here now unless you man a checkpoint or carry a weapon or drive a T-72 tank. On the outskirts of the country's second largest city, the Ukrainians and the Russians take potshots in the woods as the Ukrainian army awaits the enemy's next move.
We're still inside the city, but it's a war zone, it's a battlefield. Tanks and heavy armaments just about everywhere.
We were given access to this suburban frontier and taken to a children's camp in the trees with mock turrets and cabins and areas to play.
Ну, выстрелы хаотично. Там упадет, туда прилетит, туда прилетит.
Shells have pierced the grounds and a rocket hit the door. Our guide did not want to show his face.
It's actually punctured the door around here, the rocket. Inserted itself through the metal frame.
Nearby, we found a soldier called Doc. He'd been planting landmines when the shells came in.
What did you see? What did you experience?
Во-первых, страшно было, конечно. А так, грохот, ну, подвал помех, конечно. Ну, я словами не можу передати вам, що я чувствував на той момент. Страх за сім'ю.
Garwin, we've got to go in.
A few minutes later, we had to use his shelter.
Go.
Grad rockets incoming.
The signs of war are all around, with the remnants of a Russian column littering the trees. It's a sign of what the Ukrainian army is able to achieve. In the suburbs of Kharkiv, the Russian advance has ground to a halt. And in a gruesome display of grit and intent, we were taken to see the bodies of 5 dead Russian servicemen. A Ukrainian captain claiming the Russians have refused to repatriate the bodies. The battle may have stalled, but it certainly isn't over. Everyone in this city is sure of that. So they prepare themselves for the seemingly inevitable, regardless of the personal cost. John Sparks, Sky News in Kharkiv.
Well, Odessa to Mariupol, Kyiv to Kharkiv. Let's get the latest military analysis then from Sky's Wilf Frost, who is joined by military analyst Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. Wilf.
Thank you so much. Sean is with me here. And Sean, we decided to start our focus in the southeast of Ukraine today and into the end of the 4th week of this war. It seems that Mariupol is still bearing the brunt of the Russian attacks. Just remind us, stepping back, why Mariupol is such a key target for President Putin?
Yeah, thanks, Wilf. I think part of it, you have to go back a couple of hundred years to see that Russia owned all of this border area, all of this coastline 200 years ago. And if you subscribe to the view that Putin still hails back to the days of the Russian Empire, then taking back this land is really important. More tactically, it's also important because he's trying to link up Crimea to Russia. And of course, at the moment, Mariupol sits right in the middle of that. And therefore, that resistance has to be quashed to join that link. And if you look west to Odessa, Clearly, there's 1,000 miles of resupply, so that's probably going to be a maritime operation rather than a land operation.
And we'll see if Odessa is the next target. We'll come to that in a moment. But first of all, let's just dive in to Mariupol specifically. And of course, this is a city of just, I say in inverted commas, population 400,000 or so before war broke out, at least. Why is it taking so long for Russia to seize it? And what does seizing a city like this actually look like?
Well, we're trapped into urban warfare, and as you say, it's incredibly difficult. I think it makes a mockery of what Putin's been telling his domestic audience, that he doesn't bomb cities and he doesn't bomb populations, because evidently from the pictures, that's exactly what he's doing. But Ukrainians are fighting on their home soil. They're fighting for every street, every home, every district. They're passionate about it. And I think whilst the fighting intensifies over here, it's evident the morale of the troops is suffering. And I think this is probably a good bellwether of Ukrainian resistance across the whole country.
Ukrainian resistance, of course, heavy shelling continues in some of the latest areas that have been hit, whether by design or accident marked there on that map. Let's take a step back and look now again at the whole of Ukraine, Sean. And the question now really, what next if Mariupol were to fall? Where would be the next area of focus? Of course, we do know from the earlier reports in the show that Kyiv continues to be bombarded, though Ukrainian forces resisting fairly well the approaches from the northeast and the northwest. But where might be next if Mariupol were to fall?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and I think Putin holds the answers here. I think from an analyst's perspective, I think Kyiv remains the sort of political centre of gravity and the prize that Putin would undoubtedly want. But given the fight of Mariupol, a fraction of the size, I think he might conclude that that's a bridge too far. So I think there's two key, clear options for Putin, one of which is to take Mariupol and then seek to negotiate from a position of strength and therefore avoid having to fight in Kyiv. But by far the most dangerous option is if Putin decides to double down. It's pretty evident that the forces he originally deployed into the region are exhausted. They've had a real kick to morale and they are needing resupply of fuel, arms, etc. So by doubling down, he'd need to get forces from Russia. Now, if they've either got those in reserve today, and if that was true, he wouldn't be calling on mercenaries, which is evident they're trying to do. If he hasn't, he's going to have to mobilise the Russian economy. He's going to have to start getting the Russian industry converted, do large-scale conscription, and that is we haven't seen that level of commitment since World War II, and that would have grave implications for NATO and the West.
Sean, thank you so much. That's the latest on day 26.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, 3.4 million people have now fled abroad from this war in Ukraine. The aim for many of those fleeing the conflict is to cross the border. They hope to find refuge and a new life elsewhere. But for all of them, it is a harrowing journey. So let's bring in our correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins us now from Przemysl in Poland. And certainly, this is what you're seeing, Mark, isn't it? That those who are arriving now are some of those who've had really terrible experiences.
Just awful, yeah. We've talked to so many people over the course of the past few days. People going in so many different directions as well. Many of them, of course, leaving Ukraine, but some going back in, having dropped relatives outside the country. They now want to get back in there, get home, perhaps in some cases fight as well. Let's head inside and show you the scene here at this small train station, which has become so overwhelmed over the course of the past few days and weeks. I have to say the good news today, and we've seen this over the past couple of days, is that there are fewer and fewer people arriving now. It's not quite clear why that is. We spoke to the mayor of the town earlier on today. He was confused as well, but I think it's the case that all those people, or most of those people who are either able to leave, physically able to leave, or who want to leave, have now left, although I must say they are still coming in waves. We saw a train from Odessa arriving about an hour or so ago with 1,000 or so people on board. And as you can see here, many children as well, lots of children who are continuing to flee such frightening situations in Ukraine from all over the country. They are coming now. We've just got a few updates in terms of numbers from the UNHCR that says that 1.6 million children are now refugees outside of the country, and a staggering additional 3.3 million children are displaced within Ukraine itself. So that's almost 5 million children forced to flee their homes. That's 1 in 5 of the children that are in the country. Let's head outside to the other side, and you can have a look at the remarkable organisation that they are putting on here with food stalls. Actually, some of them have gone now, and you can see the SIM card there. People are offering free SIM cards. When people get off the trains, they're greeted by people with signs saying, effectively saying that they can have a lift to wherever it is they want to go. I've been struck that most people seem to want to stay in Poland because they hope that very soon they will be able to get back to Ukraine.
Mark, I bet they do. Thank you very much, Mark Stone there, live on the border in Poland. Well, next up, we'll have a view from Kyiv. In fact, I'll be speaking to a professor who is currently volunteering there. Well, you join us back in the Lviv region. The war may be being fought in other parts of Ukraine. That does not mean the war effort does not take place here. As you can see, the volunteers are hard at work trying to make camouflage nets. It is such a long, slow process. They used to make 25 of these each day. Now it is about 5. Some of the volunteers, would you believe, have decided to go back to work. It's like life almost stopped here, but now they're tying each bit on. If we move over, actually, you can see some of the material that's sent in. Old clothes, new clothes, material sent from manufacturers, all has to be the right colour. At the moment, we're told they're short of mid-brown and dark brown. It is, of course, winter, and so this is specifically requested by different battalions in the field. They say the dimension, they say the colour, they say also the opacity of it as well, how transparent it needs to be, but lots of it has been fleece. They can use leggings, ladies' tights and so on. These are nearly finished, specific colours as you can see, but through here, the earlier stages. They do it on netting. And this is actually an old library, would you believe? These are the bookcases that have been repurposed. It's a library that closed at the start of the war, but such was the demand for books that it decided to reopen on March the 14th. People wanted to come and still read. They also run a literary festival here, but 30 of the 33 authors involved in that are currently on the front lines, and perhaps they're the people who will come back with their war stories, and a little bit like the great war poets of the First World War. Lots of hard work here. If you look carefully at the material, you can see, some of the patterns that are needed. And the interesting thing about this is that if it's handmade, you cannot spot the pattern via a Russian drone. If it is manufactured, they can assess the pattern and they could see if people are hiding. So if it's handmade, as you can see, it's very delicate work, then it means that people can stay properly hidden. And as I said, this is all requested by specific battalions. What is really important is that people feel like they are taking part in the war effort. Let's go talk to one, actually, who himself fled Kyiv. Victor, I wonder if I can have a quick word with you. I spoke to you a little bit earlier, didn't I? I was just explaining to our audience that you were amongst those people who've decided to leave the capital city. Why did you decide to do that?
I decided to do that to take my daughter out of that city. Otherwise, me and my wife would have stayed there, and we also did volunteer work like that, making camouflage nets and so on and so forth. But our daughter would not move without us, so we had to go together.
She was frightened?
She was very frightened because of the explosions, because of the constant air alerts, because we had to sleep in the at the metro station or in the basement.
And you've decided to come and volunteer here. You were telling me that you tried on the first day, and it was so popular, there was such a queue, it reminded you of collecting butter in the Soviet era.
Yes.
But here you are, finally working. Why is it important for someone like you to volunteer and help the war effort?
First of all, this way I feel not a wasted person, because I'm a pensioner now. So I'm doing maybe a slight thing, a small thing, but I'm sure it's in the right direction. Maybe it could save somebody's life. And also to maintain my mental health, because here I don't feel how the time passes, I speak to many wonderful people like you, for example, and also people, local people, etc., etc. And doing this simple but necessary work, it's like passing a treatment of your psyche.
And without swearing, because I know you want to, what do you currently feel about what has happened to your country, to Ukraine, and what Putin has done effectively to many parts of this land?
Well, that was a monstrous thing, almost unbelievable that human beings could do that, especially in this century. It seems like Putin and his gang maybe are stuck in the Middle Ages. What they are doing here. They have caused so many grief, so many deaths, so many wounded people, so many destroyed palaces that it's incredible. I can't believe that it's happening here. And another thing that I can't believe, that Russian people support him because they have been being so manipulated using the most modern techniques of influence, psychic influence, that they believe him, that it's necessary. That's almost incredible.
Victor, thank you very much indeed. And Victor was explaining to me earlier that many people here have relatives in Russia who say, but it's fine there, what are you talking about? We've heard that again and again, haven't we? Plenty more from here, though, after this short break.
United Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account. I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families. But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Southeast Asia correspondent in Bangkok.
Well, Ukraine's refugee crisis is not just one unfolding on its border with the European Union. Millions of people have been internally displaced too. Well, the mayor here in Lviv has long said this city has reached its capacity to help those fleeing the conflict. Well, the United Nations says that in total 10 million people now have been displaced, whether in or outside this country. Situation most acute in Mariupol, where some residents are being evacuated through humanitarian corridors, but many more are fleeing on their own. Many headed for Odessa, from where Nick Martin has this report.
The buses have been leaving every day since the war began. This is where families say their farewells, and the pain of these separations is written on their faces. The Red Cross offers safe passage out of Odessa, which could be hit at any time, like the other port cities of Mariupol and Mykolaiv. 10 million Ukrainians have now fled their homes, according to the UN.
People have been coming here from across Ukraine, many of them from cities that have been attacked. From here, they head west, crossing the border to a safer place.
I was hugging my mom and trying to hold back my tears.
This is Julia. She said goodbye to her mum, and she has no idea when they'll be together again.
At least she's somewhat safe here. The rest of the family is in Mariupol. Honestly, we didn't think it's going to be that bad. We were talking to my grandma on the 1st of March. It was her birthday. She was born in 1943, so it would be very sad if she didn't survive this war as well.
There's no way that Julia can check on her family in Mariupol, not now. All she can do is save herself.
I was naive enough to think that no one would ever attack Ukraine because we have a powerful ally, Russian Federation. No one would even dare. It feels like a stab to the back. I hope people who see this news coverage will understand. But Ukrainians are not to be blamed. We were just trying to stay and grow as a nation in our country. We weren't invading anyone else's country. Yes, it's political games, it's diplomacy. But right now, people's lives are at stake.
This is the reality of war.
Thank you.
And the toll that it takes on people. Nick Martin, Sky News, Odessa.
Well, among those to have made the difficult decision to leave everything behind and escape to safety is Alina Tovik. The young Ukrainian woman has documented her experience on TikTok, including living in a bunker when the war started and making her journey to Hungary. Well, let's bring Alina in now, who has moved on to Madrid. You've certainly crisscrossed Europe, haven't you, Alina? But this is such a tragedy for so many people and such a personal journey. Why did you decide to document it?
Hello, my name is Alina, and I'm currently in Madrid. I came here on Friday, and I decided to post videos on TikTok to show the real situation of war and how people feel right now.
Well, tell us a bit about your experience then. You know, how long you stayed behind where you came from. You know, what was the worst bit for you?
I stayed in Ukraine for 2 weeks during the war, and 1 week ago I left with my mom. We took 3 trains, and one train took us 30 hours to get to the Hungarian border.
And then you've moved, obviously, to Spain now. You know, where will you settle? This is all such sort of short-term plans that everybody's making. You know, what will you do now?
Currently, we are working on our documents to stay there, like temporary protection. And once we get these documents, my mom can work and I also can study there.
And what was it like for you, you know, effectively living in a bunker? I know that was one of the things that you documented. You know, how did you get food? Were you just there at night? Was it all the time? Give us a sense of how you've been living.
So every day I heard the sounds of sirens, and that means that you need to go to the shelter or to the basement. And I went to the basement a couple times, but in general, I was hiding in the corridor or in the bathroom because the basement that I have next to our house is actually not a very safe place. And the real bomb shelter is like 10 minutes away from my home. So it's also dangerous to go there at night.
So talk us through some of your production for TikTok, if you like. What was it that you were trying to say in those?
I wanted to, most of my videos watch foreigners, and I wanted to show how we lost our freedom, that people can easily go to the supermarket today. And yesterday I talked to my father, and he said that on Sunday they were forbidden to go out because they had curfew all day long.
Well, Alina, we wish you the very best of luck. That is Alina Volek there, who has fled and documented her experience on TikTok, showing the world, like many people are, what life has been like. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's bring in Alexander here, who's, well, I think you're coordinating all of this, aren't you? I can't believe how slow and painstaking it is to try and make these nets.
Yeah, it's now slower than it was, but we still can produce a decent amount of nets per day. And each time we finish net and take it off, we sing national anthem, what we are about to do now.
You see, this one's just about to be finished. Well, hopefully we can catch that before the end of the programme. How amazed are you that so many people want to come and volunteer here to do their bit? And, you know, who are these made for?
I'm not really surprised about the sheer amount of people who came here, because each Ukrainian want to do his part and to do his best to help civilians near the front line, to our soldiers near the front line, and they come here and trying to be useful.
Yes, and the material, I know you told me earlier, you're sort of mid-brown and dark brown, and you'll change your colour with the seasons, won't you? So what are you anticipating?
Yeah, sure. For now, unfortunately, we're short on dark brown and mid-brown, but I guess in a week or two we'll switch to more greenish colors, and we have plenty of those.
Well, I will let you get on. You want to roll it, you want to sing it, and Alexandra, thank you very much indeed for hosting us here today. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll roll it.